Hi, Bob.
Hey, Hamad, how are you?
Great. How are you doing? Can you hear me okay?
I do. I hear you well. How about me?
Yes, you sound great. How are you doing? Sorry, I wanted to call a little earlier to check on how you were doing, but everything's solid, ready to roll?
Everything is solid on my end. I've run through it a few times today. I've practiced it. Um, I did a little session with Colton yesterday to make sure I could understand how to actually operate it. So,
Oh, good.
um, yeah. So let's see. I'm going to. You don't see anything yet, do you?
No, I
Okay.
just
I
see
haven't
on
shared
your
my.
message.
What do you see?
You just with yeah, with Zoom, you just say share your screen, I think.
Right. Right. I'm going to share this screen, but I have to get it into
Yeah. Yep, there
slideshow
we go.
mode. And I'm going to go into slideshow mode using the presenter. Okay.
Great.
And looks like we've got two other people already on.
Oh, excellent.
So I'm going to tell
That's
them, I'm going to
early.
ask folks to use the question and answer, the Q&A system for logging their questions, and then ideally we'll have lots of time at the end for questions.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be able to stay for the whole one. If you want me
Right.
to, I'll do my best. But if
No, I
you,
don't. No, no. If there are questions for you, I'll just jot them down and bring them back to you, and we can get back to folks.
okay, great.
Now, do you see? So wait, you're looking. Are you seeing a setup that shows the next slide and Bob's notes?
No, I'm just seeing, um, I'm just seeing the main slide, which is hone your message and work with the media to get it out.
Okay, super, cool. So it worked the way I hoped it would.
Good. Good. All
All
right,
right.
then. Well,
Well,
I'm
why don't
gonna.
we
What were
go
you?
on
Go
mute?
ahead. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
just
No.
gonna say
Why
I'm
don't
gonna
Why don't we
go
go
on
on
mute.
mute and come back at the top of the hour, and I'll I will sort of not welcome people, but just tell them who I am, and that we'll wait for a few minutes to make sure everybody has a chance to get on. But we'll start. I want to start pretty soon after the hour, if that's okay.
Yeah, I would give maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Maybe
Right.
maximum.
Right. Yeah. And I'll let them know about the Q&A feature for posing questions, and then I'll introduce you.
Sounds good. And I'm going to be very brief.
Yep.
And just do
Yeah.
a very general intro about ASBC and the goals. And we're happy to have everyone and look forward to an informative session.
Sounds good. Okay, I'm going to go on mute.
Okay, Bob, me too. Talk to you in a bit.
All right, well, let's get started. My name is Bob Keener. I'm Deputy Director of PR for ASBC, and I will be your main presenter today. The presentation part of the webinar will run about 30 minutes or so. We will definitely leave room at the end for questions. We want to ask that you use the Q&A feature to pose your questions. You can do that at any time, and I will be responding to them at the end. And now I'd like to introduce Hamad Atassi, who is our CEO. He will welcome you, and for those of you who aren't familiar with ASBC, he'll provide a little bit of background.
Thank you, Bob. And yes, I just wanted to take a quick moment to welcome everybody to the webinar. You're in great hands with Bob. Hopefully you'll find his material to be very informative and helpful as you hone and strategize on how best to work with the media to get your message out. ASBC, as Bob mentioned, if you're not familiar, is the American Sustainable Business Council. Founded in 2009. We represent over 250,000 businesses nationwide, over 250 direct member businesses, and 80 association members whose reach goes into the thousands. And we work on a wide range of sustainability issues. As you can imagine, the concept of sustainable business varies quite a bit for each individual business or organization. And we advocate, really, our core offering, if you will, is to advocate at federal level and in state capitals on behalf of our member organizations and companies within the issue areas of focus for those member organizations and companies. And a big part of that strategy is placing op-eds and policy statements within the media, and then having us be a bridge to the business voice on Capitol Hill and in state capitals so that business leaders can be the important spokespeople to the media on issues that are germane to ASBC and our member organizations. And then another aspect that we work directly within the framework of media engagement is bringing our business leaders into DC to testify and lobby Congress and different administration agencies on issues, again, that are of great import to our member organizations, collaborative organization, businesses, and all committed to sustainability overall. So that's a quick overview of ASBC. Again, we thank you for taking the time to join us today and learn more about how to engage with the media effectively, and turn it over to Bob at this point. Thank you very much.
Okay, terrific. And I think you saw quickly pass by a slide with Hamad's background, a short bio of Hamad. We will make all of the slides and all of the entire webinar recording available afterwards, so I won't belabor you. I won't belabor things right now. As Hamad said, we use a full range of advocacy strategies. In this webinar, we're going to focus on the media components, and our objective today is twofold. First, we'll talk about the power and influence you have as a business leader, as a spokesperson and champion for policy change. And second, we'll give you some information to help you step into these roles, hopefully with confidence and skill. So let's start by reviewing why it's important for business leaders to become advocates. The main reason is that business leaders have a lot of credibility with the media, just like they do with elected officials and elected official staff. And this is especially true of business media. Business people are particularly credible when it comes to countering right-wing arguments and myths against regulations, government engagement. For example, how often do you hear statements like, regulations are job killers? So the best people to debunk those myths are business people who can talk authoritatively about how good, smart regulations are vital to their business. So as a business leader, your power comes from leveraging your personal experience and your pragmatic perspective. I'm going to follow up with this later, so just sort of keep a pin on this one, if you will. The fact is, you don't have to be a policy expert. You're an expert in running a business. That's where your credibility is. And as a result, you have more knowledge about running a business, of course, than most journalists do. And so you're on equal footing. We hope that when you get quoted or profiled in the press, that's good for your business. So if you're successful with your media work, you get a twofer. It's public interest and self-interest. Seems like every time I give this presentation, things are much worse. Media outlets have downsized staffs. For most of them, they've downsized, and everybody has moved to a 24/7 model. So most journalists have very little time to research and write. They have to file their stories very quickly. Many stories are written from email exchanges or short phone interviews with just a few sources. I say here, the third bullet, no one covers business policy, because typically journalists cover either policy or business, but not the intersection of the two. So that makes our job a lot harder. As a result of all this, when a story is developing, you want to have, you need to have credibility in the area, because the journalist has no time to vet you. You need to get to the reporter very quickly, since their deadlines are really tight. You need a concise, quick to read response, because they're swamped with pitches. And ideally include something pithy or colorful that they can either drop right into what they're working on, or at least that shows them that you're able to give a good quote if they were to call you. They want stories, elements that fit their standard frames. So we'll talk about this later, but you're going to want to look at how the journalist you're pitching actually covers their stories, so that you can fit sort of how they do it. When we work with the media, we have several objectives. Of course, not necessarily all of these in each pitch. Of course, we want to win the issue. The way we do that, often we need to break the frame from the conventional and obvious narrative that tends to reinforce the destructive policies that we're trying to argue against. And we want to draw attention to the fact that triple bottom line policies have proven their worth. I mentioned regulations are job killers, and other examples are jobs versus polar bears. So what we want to do is reinforce that there are sound business arguments for whatever issue we happen to be talking about. And this makes it possible for a wavering Democrat or even a moderate Republican to take our position. And this is important because it's important. I want to flag this, because if you're passionate about a policy issue, your instinct will likely be to lead from the heart and talk about the moral or human reasons why you support the issue. Unfortunately, this makes it too easy for you to be dismissed as not pragmatic or businesslike. So that's why we focus completely, obsessively, on business and economic arguments to support our case. And we think it's important that if you're out in the media, talking to the media, that you do the same. Obviously, we want to inject your brand into the discussion so that the message is associated with established, credible business brands, not just ASBC as a trade organization. We are strong because you are strong, because our business members are strong. Of course, we want to keep building the ASBC coalition to make it more influential, to give it more power. And so we want to do that as well. So those are our objectives. Now, given the realities of the current media environment, here's how we help get our members into the game. When we have planned opportunities with our members, such as fly-ins or district office visits or things like that, we'll add on a media component that's in parallel. So you might see us having folks at press conferences, or even hosting our own press conference typically, more likely, we'll be doing one-on-one meetings with media so that we can get their attention that way. We also will distribute members' quotes through press releases to inject them into coverage of breaking news. We'll pitch business leaders to journalists so that they can be interviewed. We'll ghostwrite and co-write op-eds that we place under the member's name. And of course, we distribute messages through social media. And we will, of course, help with coaching and prepping members with talking points and business cases and so on. So now let's take an example of how this would work in practice, how I typically go out and pitch media, how you might take it on yourself if you want to do this by yourself, or if you're working with PR folks, how they might be likely to do it. Thought we could pick an example, like let's say we want to promote a state carbon price system in our state. So I'll work through an agenda talking about how we approach media, working with journalists, pitching and working with journalists, and we'll spend a little bit of time, not anywhere near enough, on op-eds, columns, and blogs. And then, of course, we'll leave time at the end for questions. And at ASBC, of course, we'll be doing a lot of this work for you, but this is a framework that you hopefully can take on your own if you want to be out working on your own. So first step would be to research two main types of journalists at the media outlets that you want to go after. As I mentioned earlier, it's hard to find a journalist who covers business policy. So we look for folks on two different sides. We look for folks who cover the policy issue, as well as folks who cover business. So for example, excuse me, at your biggest newspaper in your state, the government team will probably have a reporter who covers energy and environmental policy. That reporter is a great target, but they may also have a business reporter who covers the energy industry. That might be a good target. So, so it's important to sort of look at both targets and see which is the best way in. The titles of the folks that you're researching will tell you where they are in the hierarchy. Reporters are under editors, bookers are under producers, but that doesn't tell you how stories are developed, and it doesn't tell you really what's your best way in. For example, at some media outlets, reporters are supposed to come up with story ideas, and so they're great targets. At other outlets, editors may be making most of the decisions and assigning the reporters who just do what they're told. Often there are regular team meetings where story ideas get discussed, decisions are made. The process will be opaque in most cases, and so you can only learn what their process is by asking. And typically I do that sort of in the pitch mode, which we'll come to a bit later. To simplify things, I tend to start with the lowest person in the hierarchy and work my way around until I understand how things work and who's best to target. Of course, you're making friends along the way, and so at the end of the process, you'll have lots of friends at every outlet that you go after. Once you have picked the targets that you're going after, you want to study their work, see what they've done that's the closest to what you have in mind. In terms of prioritizing your outreach, I think it's good to start with easy targets and those that are probably local. In the town where your business is located, if there's a small local paper that's in your town, that's a perfect place to start. That way you're learning what works in sort of an easy, low-key environment. You can learn what works there, what doesn't work. You can revise your pitch, revise your approach before you go after the bigger media outlets in your region. If you're doing your own outreach, I recommend that you stage your outreach and pitching one at a time. That way you can carry your learnings from one to the other, and you can build your skill and improve your pitch as you go along. When it's time to start your outreach, I like to use both email and phone. What I do is I write the email, but I don't send it, and then I call. And if I have to leave a message, I can say in my message that I'm sending an email, and then I can just hit send when I hang up. That way, a lot of journalists will ignore email if they don't have a phone call that goes with it. So that's sort of why I do it that way. You're kind of flagging the email. If you do get them live, obviously introduce yourself and your business. Ask if they're interested in your perspective on the issue. Ask if now is a good time. Journalists are super busy sometimes. Sometimes they're not. So it could be a good time, but you don't want to assume, and you want to be respectful. And it's a flag for them that you understand how they work, and that you're going to be good to work with because you understand how they work. If it is a good time, go ahead and make your pitch. In my pitch, usually I'm trying to get a meeting, because I think face-to-face meetings are really the best way to get across what you need to get across in this complicated world, and also to show them that you care that much about this. You care that much about them, and making getting your messages across. I tell journalists that we can be in and out in 30 minutes. Sometimes we are, sometimes they want to go longer, which is fine, but it's a signal to them, again, that we know they're busy, we value their time, and I find it really helps. So what's the pitch look like? It depends on the story you want to see. One way to start is to think about what the ideal headline would be. So, for example, is it something like, local business person takes stand for carbon pricing? So that could be a story about how you went to the State House to meet with elected officials to tell them that in your business experience, carbon pricing is the best way to address climate change. In your pitch, if you can, you want to hook on to something that's in the news. So why now? Why should they write about this now? It could be that you just got back from the State House, or that you're going next week. Or it could be that there's this thing called the Green New Deal that everybody's talking about, and a carbon price could be part of that. So there you go. There's a hook in something that's actually in the news right now. You do want to be clear on what your key messages are. I tell people, 3 to 5 key messages. Be disciplined. Don't try to communicate more than that. In terms of your key points, you definitely want to talk about how this relates to your business. So how is it that a carbon price would be good for your business? Is it going to reduce your insurance rates because climate change won't be as intense, or you'll have fewer supply chain disruptions, or whatever the business case is. Again, remember that's sort of the key way to show that you're really thinking about this from a business perspective, and so you can't be dismissed. Always good to think up pithy quotes and sound bites. Again, write it up in the email, and remember the subject line is really important. That's what people see when they see your email. So spend some time thinking about what you want that to say. So remember, of course, when you're making your pitch, you're building relationships. If they don't run with your pitch now, offer to be there in the future. You want to sell them first on you being a good source for them. And then if you can get them to write about you, great. Worst case scenario, if they call you because they want a quote from a local business person about some issue, hey, that's fine. That's great. Again, try for in-person meetings. If you have an interesting facility, invite them out, because journalists often like to get out of the office. Often I find if I give them the option of meeting in their office or for coffee nearby their office, they'll go for coffee. So, definitely offer that. Of course, you're building a relationship. You'll keep in touch. When news happens, either outside, like, there's this thing, the Green New Deal that happened, get in touch when there's outside news that happens, or when something happens in your business or in your advocacy that you want to share with them. And again, in terms of being responsive, when they contact you, get back right away, because you want to prove to them that you are responsive. Then they're going to be more likely to keep you on their good, happy list of sources than not if you do that. Okay, so now I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about writing. There are lots of good reasons for writing and trying to publish op-eds, columns, and blogs. I think if you like to write, you owe it to yourself to try. The best reason, I think, is that you get to control the message. Unlike in an interview where you might say something you didn't really mean, or something that could be misinterpreted, here there's no risk for that. Of course, if you're going to do this, you're going to need to research facts and evidence to support your agenda. Really good idea to study the outlet where you're pitching your piece, see what kind of content they typically run, see how your piece would fit, see how you might want to modify your piece so that it fits better. Everybody has requirements and processes that they want you to follow for submissions. So if they're not readily obvious on the website, you can call and find out what they are, and then you'll need to follow them. In some cases, I think it's okay to call and email to see why they didn't pick up something that you sent. If it's a letter to the editor, generally disadvised to call. But for longer pieces, you may catch somebody who answers your phone call and can tell you something about why it didn't work or how you might do a better job. That's not their job, so you have to be really friendly about it and be really solicitous. But I find it can be helpful, and it's worth trying at least. So that's a quick take on writing for placement in the media. We can come back to that in the question session if you want. Now let's turn to how you can get engaged in the media with us. First of all, if you're a member, let us know that you're willing to talk to journalists. I do have a list of folks that I like to keep updated, that I will blast out an email saying, hey, I've got a reporter interested in X and wants to talk to a business person about it. If it's not right for you, you don't have to respond. If it is right for you, really get back right away. And I mean, like, within an hour. Sometimes I'll have a radio opportunity that has to happen this afternoon. Usually we have a little more time, like it's tomorrow, but usually it's not much longer than that. And the reporter or the producer, whoever's setting this up, wants to know right away that we're working it, that we've got something possible. So the sooner that you can get back to me, the better. Obviously, if you're going to talk about an issue with a reporter, interviewer, you're going to want to read up on it. Check out our business case materials and our other materials to make sure that you understand sort of how to talk about it from that business and economic perspective. Doesn't hurt to prepare what you want to say. Come up with a soundbite or two. And by soundbite, I mean short, whether it's for radio or print. You know, a soundbite like, I'd rather pay the full cost of carbon now than be out of business in 20 years, is exactly the kind of thing that they, you know, any reporter or producer would love to have, to point to a business person who's got a perspective on the issue. Okay, so I said it would be about 30 minutes. I hope it wasn't too fast. I'm going to look at questions now, and I see that we have 4 at the moment. First question says, in terms of wording, do you use the adjective progressive to describe the business or the policy that you're promoting? If so, how does mainstream media receive that wording? We don't. We don't use progressive. We use, we are bipartisan. I call us apartisan. You know, we want to appeal to both sides. We want to, that's why sort of the obsession with business case arguments, economic arguments, that kind of thing. So I think mainstream media, it's evolving, but you know, progressive still has sort of a fairly left connotation. So we wouldn't use it, and we wouldn't recommend you use it. Next question. Researching for key journalists seems to involve a lot of time and effort that we as a small business do not have. My firm, Green Retirement, is a member of ASBC. Do you offer help in that regard? We generally don't get that granular. Happy to talk to you about how you might do something on your own, but generally we don't get that granular in terms of being able to actually provide hands-on help there. Next question is, I'm not sure if it has been mentioned, but will the slides be made available to us? Yes. Yes, we will post on the website. I think you see the link at the bottom of the slide. It's our website /webinars, and we'll have the webinar there. We'll have the slides there, and we'll have the actual recording of the webinar, so you can hear all my ahs and everything. Next question. Do you have specific tips about what to include in a subject line that will catch the attention of the media target? The specific tips are, you know, study headlines. I think that's the study headlines. Also, this is a little bit like direct mail. So study email subject lines that you click on. You know, it's sort of that clickbait thing. What's gonna grab your attention? The one thing that I do for folks that I get mixed reviews on, but I still use it. I started using it a long time ago when the internet was very young. And it is to put the person's first name in the subject line with a colon after it. So anyway, that's something I do. I hear from both sides on that. Let's see. What email should we use to let you know we're willing to talk to journalists? So my email is bkeener@asbcouncil.org. So our URL with B Keener in front of it. And yes, please let me know. Next question. I've heard some journalists say that they don't have time to take calls and won't answer the phone. How do you overcome this and see success when you're just able to use email or social media? Yes. Okay. So journalism 101 is that they will always tell you that they don't take phone calls. And for some, that is really true. But for many, it's not true. They will take phone calls. They just would prefer not to. And so they would like to discourage you from calling. So it's tricky. I call at different times. They tend to have, each of them will have sort of an individual sort of cycle to their day. So I call at different times to try to find out when they tend to answer the phone. I call and leave a message once per day. not more than once per day, but I might call more than once per day. And when I leave a message, I say, and I'm sending you another copy of the email. I'll keep trying to get you, but if you can get back to me about what's a good time to talk, that would be great. So like that. So knowing that they're busy, I say, I'll keep trying to get you, but, give them the sense that I'm going to keep calling until they call me back or they do something. Typically what happens is they'll reply to the email after a couple of those messages. Sometimes there are some that don't have outgoing messages or don't take messages, and that's really tough. Then I look for other people to contact at the outlet. Next question. Do you interact with journalists via social media to make pitches or get attention? If so, how do you leverage social media channels? I haven't had a lot of success with this. I have dabbled, I have experimented and tried it. Some journalists have like an open DM set up on their Twitter accounts. And so that's a way sometimes, but then I find, half of them don't reply, even when you give them a direct DM. So I tend to not use it as a way for direct communication, like pitching and things like that, but more to sort of follow them, hope they follow me back, and then be putting stuff out that I think is interesting to them generally. So that's how I do it. There may be other tips that other folks have. Let's see. Another question is, any tips on presenting an opposing opinion on a policy issue from that being advocated by a large incumbent business organization like a state chamber of commerce? Okay. Yeah. So we often are on the other side of the chamber, or like NFIB or other business advocacy groups. And I try to feel out the journalist for sort of how they feel about their role in the world. This is going to get a little esoteric, but a journalist's job is to present the facts, and the facts are that there are different opinions about these things, and there are different interpretations of facts, and there are different facts and different arguments being made on both sides. And so, I try to find a way to help them see that it's their job to carry our messages. And that could be just because we should have equal time. Just like if you think about one example I sort of hate, but it's how climate deniers worked for years and years and years, saying, we demand equal time, right? And they got journalists to carry their messages. So I think you don't want to be demanding, but you can be persistent and assertive and say, this is a different view. This is a legitimate business view on this issue. Yes, it's counter to what you believe is the prevailing business view, but telling them things like, business is not a monolith, just like any other group. You wouldn't say all African Americans feel this way, or all bald white men over 60 feel this way. You would say, here's a group, and here are some representatives who are giving a perspective that they say comes from that group, and you would couch it that way. You wouldn't say this is what all business people believe. So that's sort of the kinds of different arguments that I would make in sort of advocating for that in that situation. Okay, I don't see more questions. I do hope this was helpful. And I do hope the next slide comes up. Okay, there it is. So there's my email address. And I also answer my phone all the time. So if you want to chat, we can chat. Again, hope this was helpful, and look forward to working with you and getting lots of media coverage on the issues that we care about. And thank you so much for participating. Take care.